Back in the Crizzle. Gridiron 360. Happening, Dave. We're going to talk about the NFC North and updates from about a week ago in free agency in this division, which includes your Chicago Bears. What you think there?
They're getting all kinds of love for their moves.
Whee! All right, so let's start off in the NFC North, dating back to March 19th. We saw that their Minnesota Vikings kicker, Dan Bailey, 32 years old, just turned 32 in January, just finished his second season with the Vikings. And he was 27 and 29 in field goal attempts, which is pretty darn good.
I think that was a no-brainer because the kicking game sucked last year in the NFL overall, and I don't think a lot of teams are looking to re-up it because it doesn't look like the new crop has been very good.
No, and on top of his field goal kicking prowess, he was 40 out of 44, I think, in extra points, which is, look, with the new extra point rules. That's, people have been missing.
Yep.
So it's important to know that the guy is pretty solid. He's over 90% in both extra point and field goal categories. Let's move forward. We'll go to the 20th.
All right.
Your Chicago Bears sign a one-year deal with safety Deion Bush. Speak to me.
He's a consummate backup, a special teams guy. It's a re-sign. Came out of Miami. Never, that is not going to be, I hope to God that's not going to be their safety to start with. I think I could see the Bears doing something, maybe trying to get somebody on the cheap to get more
let's
thumper.
roll right into the 21st, because on the 21st, they signed cornerback Artie Burns.
Okay.
From the Raiders.
Yep.
Wasn't it the Raiders?
No, he was from Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, sorry.
Pittsburgh.
Artie Burns was in Pittsburgh. What was I thinking of the Raiders? Oh, that must have been, I can't remember who it was. Anyway, so he comes from Pittsburgh.
Yep. He's a former first rounder.
But again, somebody in the defensive backfield.
He's on a prove it deal. He was not a strong performer in Pittsburgh, did not live up to his draft status. Another guy out of Miami. And, I think they're going to allow him to compete. I believe the Bears have a guy on their roster in Tolliver who he had a really good career up until his last year at LSU. Was guarded widely, talked about as being that type that he's big and physical that could shut down. He was a practice squad guy when they had some injuries with Prince Amukamara, who they have let go, and he's moved on. That they want some competition there, but I'm not so sure that Artie Burns is guaranteed that number 2 spot, but he'll get his chance to fight for it. I think that's how the Bears are going to leave that spot. I think their pass rush, I don't care what anybody says, it got better. I know they got dogged a little bit on the Robert Quinn signing. I think it was a good sign.
I think that's a good signing.
It was. I don't think it's
he had a great year last year.
Yeah,
it might have been at the detriment of DeMarcus Lawrence not having as good of a year as expected, but
yeah, and Khalil Mack, was getting triple teamed regularly. Triple team, that's ridiculous. But the fact was, this was a team that was without Akeem Hicks, who is one of the most underrated still defensive tackles. The guy is just a monster, and his motor never turns off. I think getting him back healthy, he came back. I forget what it was. Like he hurt his elbow, I believe it was. It was in his arm. And, obviously they use a lot of leverage. And when he came back, you could tell watching the last couple of games he came back when they had an outside shot at getting in the playoffs. And he just couldn't tackle. He couldn't grab guys, so they'd run right through him because he would drag his arm around. So when that changes and you add the Robert Quinn, that matters. So my point going back to the corner is, they've got Kyle Fuller, who is honestly, this is why I love Vic Fangio. He was a number 1 draft pick, and they said, you know what, kid, you're not getting it done. And Fangio lit him up, talked bad about him in a very underlying way, and got that guy to just turn it on. And he got a big contract last year, and instead of coming in and going, I got my money, he played tough. He's tough against the run. He can handle all number 1 receivers well. He's not the best shutdown corner, but he can handle the number 1 guy, and I like it. So Artie Burns, you're going to get a chance to prove it.
All righty. Now, right around this time, and this isn't necessarily a free agent signing, but we know that defensive end, one of the top defensive ends left out in free agency is Everson Griffin from the Minnesota Vikings. And right around the 20th, 21st, he sends out a tweet. He's twatting. He sends out a tweet saying goodbye to the Minnesota fans. We don't know. He hasn't been signed as far as we know. This is a guy that they drafted him like 4 years ago, and he's done very well for them. And obviously, the reason I say that is it appears that Minnesota is definitely parting ways, if that says anything, or at least he thinks so in his mind.
Yeah, so I mean that's significant in the sense that you remember this team kind of was all in over the last couple of years. They went out and extended Kirk Cousins, which I don't have a problem with that move, especially given the way he played in the last 2/3 of the season. Certainly started to play more towards that contract and was winning big games and throwing the ball. But then you go out and you get rid of Stephon Diggs, and remember that was the guy that carried him when Thielen went down.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, kind of interesting. And now their defense, again they cleared some big names. Xavier Rhodes, who is not where he was 3-4 years ago, got rid of him.
Mm-hmm.
Got rid of Mackenzie Alexander.
Mm-hmm. Got rid of my other Clemson guy, J-Ron Kearse, who was a safety.
Yeah, they're talking. They've floated apparently Mike Harris, who they tagged out there for trade. So it's interesting what they're doing, and they don't have a lot of room to work with.
Okay. Let's see. Where are we? I didn't see much happening in your division on the 22nd of March. On the 23rd, we see that again. Your Chicago Bears sign a 1-year deal with linebacker, former DN from the Louisiana State University Tigers, Barkevious Kiki Mingo.
Yeah, I mean this is probably spells the end for Aaron Lynch, who is their third rotational DN, would be my guess. This is a guy actually really what makes him more dominant is he's actually been pretty solid in special teams. The Bears special teams got better last year. They spent a little bit extra money and got Cordell Patterson. I can never say it right. And he was good for them. I mean, good for the Bears. I'm interested. They've had kind of a lifer special teamer in Sherrick McManus. I don't know if that kind of, this is kind of a different role, but just given some of the moves they've made, because I think you're going to mention. Well, no, maybe we didn't mention it. They also signed a safety out of LSU, Jordan, who's also another special teams guy. Yeah. So, again, it looks like these are all kind of fringe, revamping the special teams and kind of just filling out the depth chart type moves.
Okay. Let's see. Let's move to the 24th of March where the Green Bay Packers jump into the free agent game, and they agree to a deal with wide receiver Devin Funchess from the I think he was with the Chargers last. Drafted by the Carolina Panthers.
No, wasn't it the Colts, I thought, is where he was.
Yes, yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was with the Colts.
Prior to that with Carolina.
What it was is he suffered an injury in week 1 with the Colts against the
Chargers. Yep.
Right, and it was a clavicle injury. So he really lasted less than a full game all year. Kid that was a tall receiver out of Michigan a few years ago. Yep. A lot of speculation was that he'd be used as a tight end.
Yeah, he's an oversized receiver, not particularly fast, catches the ball. So,
yeah. So we'll see. Trying to, I think, give a little more to Aaron Rodgers if he can somehow maybe revamp his career a little bit. I don't know, but giving more to him aside than just having his go-to guy in Devontae Adams. So let's move on. The 25th, we had the Minnesota Vikings signing wide receiver Tajay Sharp to a 1-year deal.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think that's your fill-in for Stephon Diggs. But, again, we're kind of at a point where we're going to start to see roster fill-ins, trying to create some competition in some areas maybe where you're not terribly deep. Again, we talk a lot about this. What NFL teams want to do right now is they want to raise the floor in their position group rooms, and this is probably one of those they're going to try to do that, maybe, and with the idea that maybe we catch somebody in the right year.
Yep. Okay, and then the last one I have, unless there's something I'm missing, was more currently. Was that today or yesterday?
I think it started yesterday.
Okay, so once again, it seems like one of the busier teams in free agency, your Chicago Bears, sign, is he a guard? Offensive
he's a tackle.
Georgia Fetty.
Yep.
1-year deal.
Former first-round pick out of Seattle, didn't live up to the hype. I think what they're looking at, he did play a couple of games at guard, saw a little bit of time there. I think they're looking at him. Remember, they lost Kyle Long. He's retired. He was often injured in the last 3-4 years. I think they've got a guy in Rashad Coward who is kind of their swing guard. And he started in place, and he really wasn't terribly effective. I think this is a hope that they can kind of maybe at least light his career up and get him to where he can come in and play the guard position and compete there. Because, again, the Bears don't have a lot of room to move right now. I still look for them to draft a guard. They've got 2 second-round picks, no first-rounder on the Khalil Mack trade. I would probably look for them to look for an interior offensive lineman in that spot, and so maybe that's going to be your competition. At the very least, you probably have a swing tackle.
Okay, well, they have him, Seattle had him on the depth chart at right tackle.
Right, that is where he was playing. So and it's the right guard position that the Bears need currently from a starting perspective. And so the idea probably is to bring him in and look at him to do that.
All right. So that's it. That's all I've got. Now, mind you, folks, there might be a couple other things. These are more the highlighted ones, and I think we're hitting the majority of them. But, yeah, that kind of wraps it up for the NFC North. Before we... this is not a long one, but before we end it, I mean, any thoughts on what's shaping up? It kind of looks like maybe Minnesota might end up taking a step back, but you never know. I mean, it's a solid team. I think they're well coached, but they did lose some pieces and appear to still have some pieces that are going to go that have been important to them. Green Bay is still Green Bay. Detroit, if you can't see my hands are in the air, I just don't know. Yeah. And then your Bears.
Yeah, I think really what's going on, I mean, I kind of looked around, and this is all opinion stuff, but I don't think the Bears have done terrible in free agency. I think the thing that's really going to get them the bad knock is I agree. I don't know that the Jimmy Graham move was really excited a whole lot of people. And when that's your first move out of the gate, especially when the tampering window opened and the first tweets that were coming out was the Bears were talking to Bridgewater. I think some of that was, I think the Jimmy Graham move is kind of tainting some of these other moves. Robert Quinn was only 2 years older than Leonard Floyd, the DN they gave up on. They gave him an extra, I think it's like an extra, they're paying him contract-wise about the same. I think they spread his money a little bit better, so it wasn't as big of a cap hit. So I think they improved in the pass rush. Let's be honest. If you didn't sign Teddy Bridgewater and you didn't sign Tom Brady, even though there was a lot of quarterbacks out there, what one would have really, really excited you? I mean, I got to be honest with you. Like, I look at Colts and holding on to Brissett is the word that they're going to do. You and I watched Phillip Rivers. I'm not sure all that's left in the tank there. So, I mean, beyond that, I mean, you're talking about retreads, and I don't, you could say what you want, go get Cam. I watch Cam play. The Bears need somebody that can push the ball downfield. Mitch Trubisky already overthrows receivers and underthrows receivers a lot. They don't need another quarterback that does that, and especially one that's more injury prone. So, I get all this love for Cam Newton, but Cam Newton hasn't been the same since they went to the Super Bowl. And that Super Bowl pretty much, I think, was like the end of him. He got the hell beat out of him and hasn't been right since. So I guess, the Foles thing doesn't really bother me. The Bears have said all along, we're bringing in competition for Mitch Trubisky. So that's exactly what Foles does. I'm not saying it's great competition, and I know a lot of people don't like Trubisky at all, and I'm not saying they're wrong, but the reality is they did what they said they're going to do there, and beyond that, they brought back a lot of guys. Like, I don't have a problem with Trevathan, paid about the same that they would have paid for Kwiatkowski. I mean, I look at it that way. Then I go look at Minnesota. Minnesota's done a lot more subtraction, and they've signed their guys. Detroit's probably the only other one that's been really active, and it looks like they're trying to redo the New England Patriots. And Green Bay continues to live and die off Aaron Rodgers. Nothing they've done in free agency is exciting. So right now, I'd say all these teams kind of are getting a little bit of a trend down look to them.
Yeah, I mean,
and I can't say it's wrong.
The Funchess thing is,
yeah,
because but like now, if they had, granted, probably wouldn't happen in division, but suppose they get then Green Bay goes out and gets somebody from like Diggs from Minnesota, then you'd be like, ooh.
Right.
Ooh,
now
you're talking. No, I don't know that Funchess is a guy that you're like, what? I mean, he's not going to. I just don't see him being like a solid 2 to Devontae Adams.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of what you're seeing is a lot of sitting on the sidelines from Green Bay and even Minnesota. And I think you're seeing a lot of 1 year trying to fill holes that they didn't have a lot of money to fill from the Bears and Detroit. I mean, Detroit's Detroit. So I guess that's kind of the way I look at the division. But, you know, I think there's something to be said. I think this division can be a little bit more up for grabs. I think the Bears are going to be better this year than they were last year, certainly, from a record standpoint. But with a quarterback hole, you just don't know how much.
You're going to be riding
how much.
dying by how well he does. Because, I mean, look, at the beginning of the year last year, and even as we started to creep into, you know, the first third of the year, I looked at this division as one of the tougher ones in the league. And then as things started to play themselves out throughout the end of the year, you know, because of Chicago's success, especially defensively, year prior, you know, it wasn't there. You didn't see what you really wanted. They kind of fell back. Now, they weren't as bad as Detroit, but then it became kind of a two-pony race between Minnesota and Green Bay as the year came to a close. So I don't know if, you know, you're saying it's up for grabs, which means, you know.
Well, I mean, Minnesota was up there with Green Bay, so right there puts it up for grabs. I'm not saying the Bears are the up for grabs, but I'll say this. If I take each team, Detroit has to finally start doing something defensively and has to show that they can run the ball. They're still not doing that, even though that's what Patricia was bought in for. Minnesota has to prove with all this subtraction that they can somehow get better. Okay, so somebody's going to have to elevate their game in order to do that. Green Bay continues to live and die off of their quarterback, and that's a successful way to get to the playoffs, but it's not terribly successful in the playoffs. So their receiving core is going to have to improve. So there's all kinds of different things they're going to have to do. And then the Bears, I look at it, the Bears are going to have to get something out of Mitch Trubisky or Nick Foles that neither one of them has done before. Either Trubisky has to have the light come on and start playing more aggressive, but also at the same time has got to be able to get the ball downfield. And Foles has to prove that he can play in the regular season. And that's it. That's the whole division to me in a nutshell.
Well, there you have it.
And I'm right.
Yeah, Mr. NFC North, Mr. Chicago Bear, don't you dare. That'll wrap up the NFC North update since the 19th of March on free agency moves. We will dice and slice, and we will move on to our last division in the NFC, and that will be the West. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time, as always.